Jurassic World. The film that began the Jurassic World era and rode the 2015 nostalgia wave to become one of the most grossing movies ever made. However, this movie has very little going for it, and after 11 years since its release, it's become completely irrelevant in comparison to the original Jurassic Park. And while The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 were not entirely bad per se, the entire Jurassic World trilogy is an absolute disaster. Jurassic World has many issues, but if I were to try to put them in neat little categories, there are three main issues that are catastrophic. The first and least significant one being John Hammond's final wish. Jurassic World implies that John Hammond's final wish was to rebuild the park, to share the wonder of dinosaurs, which was his main motivation in Jurassic Park. But if you can recall from The Lost World, Hammond actually changed his perspective after the events of Jurassic Park, and he even funded a mission to prevent InGen from making another park, and he was completely on board with the idea to leave the dinosaurs in peace on the island. So with just the first few minutes of Jurassic World's opening, it breaks the continuity of the Jurassic Park films. Hammond's dying wish would have been that the park never be built, not that it should be rebuilt. What's interesting is that the film didn't need this to be the case. Mentioning Hammond and contradicting the continuity of the other Jurassic Park films doesn't really achieve anything that the plot of Jurassic World needs, except nostalgia. Jurassic World is primarily driven by nostalgia, that's powered by the original Jurassic Park. So mentioning Hammond strengthens the nostalgia for Jurassic Park, but contradicting Hammond's final wish doesn't achieve anything more than that. The second major issue is everything that's linked to the Indominus Rex, and here there's a huge plethora of issues to go through, but they all have to do with the Indominus Rex one way or another. The first thing, and the thing that seems to fly under the radar for a lot of people, is that the Indominus Rex was created because people are bored of dinosaurs. That statement that justifies the creation of the Indominus Rex is absolute nonsense. No way people would become bored of dinosaurs. You know that we have had zoos for over 200 years, and no one is saying that people are bored of elephants or tigers, or any animals in general for that matter. Jurassic World in and of itself has only been operating for 10 years in the Jurassic universe. And you're telling me that only after 10 years, people became bored of dinosaurs? Absolutely not. I'm not saying that people wouldn't be interested in seeing hybrid dinosaurs, but there's no way that the Indominus Rex is worth the $38 million that it took to make it. But okay, let's give the movie the benefit of the doubt and say that people are getting bored of dinosaurs. The Indominus Rex isn't going to fix that issue. The public would then get bored of the Indominus Rex just as fast. And as far as hybrids go, the Indominus Rex is pretty tame. The biggest difference it has from a T-Rex is that it has bigger arms and that it's white. People would get bored of the Indominus Rex real fast, and the park would be doomed to operate at a financial loss, and eventually close down. Except Claire tells us that revenue has gone up by 2.5%, which is the reality of what a dinosaur park would be. Because of course people would pay to see dinosaurs, just like they do with regular zoos. So even if we give the film the benefit of the doubt, and say that people are bored of dinosaurs, the logic still doesn't hold up. If the park was actually struggling, like the movie tries to suggest but fails to justify, the park wouldn't invest $38 million into a single hybrid. Though I guess the Indominus Rex did have a sibling, but my point still stands. But that's just the least of the problems surrounding the Indominus Rex, because its escape sequence is entirely contrived. So the Indominus Rex has the ability to camouflage and hide itself from infrared cameras, which is how it tricked the humans into believing it could have escaped. However, it's convenient that no one is aware at the time that the Indominus has these kind of abilities. But when Henry Wu is told that the Indominus managed to hide itself from infrared cameras, he immediately knew off the top of his head that the cuttlefish DNA that was given to the Indominus for accelerated growth also could have granted it this ability. But Henry or no one in InGen had the foresight to think that giving it that kind of genome combination would have allowed the Indominus Rex to do this. Henry would have learned his lesson from the original Jurassic Park, when the dinosaurs managed to breed in the wild because they filled the sequence gaps with frog DNA. And also, why is the information about what the Indominus is made of classified in the first place? Imagine you're going to see a hybrid dinosaur for the first time, and its description just says, main genome is T-Rex, rest is classified. I'm sure the customers will appreciate that a lot. Hammond's tour in the original Jurassic Park legit showed that the DNA was combined with frogs, because that's interesting to know. And there is no downside to telling everyone what the Indominus is made of. Actually, if everyone knew that it was part Velociraptor, it would have prevented Hoskins from using them against the Indominus. And because Hoskins and Henry were in cahoots, Henry absolutely would have told Hoskins about that. Except he didn't. But okay, let's move on. The Indominus masks itself within the paddock. So Claire and Owen and the paddock manager start to think that the Indominus might have managed to escape because of the claw marks it cleverly made on the wall. So then Claire of course calls the control room to track the Indominus Rex's location because it has a tracking implant inside its skin. And she learns that the Indominus is still in the paddock and everything is alright and the Indominus never escapes and the movie ends. Except Claire doesn't do this. Yet. Before just calling the control room, she gets into her car and calls the alert before confirming the actual location of the Indominus. Why in the world would you leave the Indominus paddock control room? All you need to do is call the control room to confirm the location, because then you know which way it's headed and which parts need to be evacuated. But getting into your car to drive presumably into the control room, but you don't even know where the Indominus is yet. She could have ran into the Indominus in the jungle while driving if it had actually escaped. And then, instead of Owen and the other park workers helping with the emergency procedures, they go into the paddock to look at the claw marks from close-up. Why in the world would you not confirm before going into the paddock whether or not the Indominus is still there? It could be hiding in a bush, and maybe first at least check if the infrared cameras have blind spots before going into the paddock. Believing that the Indominus actually escaped is also completely nonsensical. Not because of the wall climbing, but because someone would definitely have seen or heard a loud thud of the Indominus falling on the other side of the paddock, as there are workers actively around there. There is no logic applied with any of the characters here. Of course you could say that they are in distress, but being in distress does not mean being completely incompetent. Because realistically, the Indominus wouldn't be able to escape in this way, except if the plot is contrived. But okay, so the Indominus Rex escapes. But thankfully, the park has a team in place to recover the Indominus Rex, because of course it would. So the Indominus Rex gets tranquilized and transported into some other paddock for the time being, and the movie ends. Except the capture team doesn't use tranquilizers. They use tasers against the Indominus Rex. Simon Masrani just said, "We have 38 million invested in that asset. We are not going to kill it." So why in the world would you not use tranquilizers? Both Roland and Sarah tranquilized the T-Rex in The Lost World. No way that the Indominus Rex would be any different. Unless it's immune to tranquilizers, which is why the capture team has to use tasers. But then the movie would need to establish this. But then why would you create a dinosaur that's immune to tranquilizers? In any case, it doesn't make sense. The Indominus Rex should have been tranquilized immediately. In fact, every single paddock should have tranquilizers on hand to deal with any potential breakout. But because the plot does not want the Indominus to be tranquilized, the Indominus kills the entire capture team, and it even tanks gunshots. But more on that later. But then Simon Masrani actually decides to kill the Indominus, and so the Indominus gets shot from the safety of the helicopter and the movie ends. Except the Indominus doesn't get shot. Actually, the soldier handling the minigun completely misses the Indominus, which gives it enough time to break into the aviary and release the flying dinosaurs. Even if Simon Masrani is not the best pilot, and actually, why wouldn't InGen have a different pilot available on the island at this time? but he actually does pretty well here. But the soldier misses all of his shots from the minigun. And let's not forget that the Indominus is as big as a T-Rex. It's a massive target, but it manages to survive thanks to the power of plot armor. But it's time to get to the final broken Indominus scene. The scene where around 20 qualified military personnel don't manage to kill the Indominus, even if the Velociraptors turned sides. You legit just shoot and the Velociraptors and the Indominus die. I can get behind the idea of the Indominus surviving single gunshots, but this kind of gunfire? And the rocket launcher blast, that was so close. Oh well. Everything to do with the Indominus is so contrived and broken that there's almost nothing that makes any sense. Unless Henry Wu added a special DNA of his own creation, called the plot armor genome, so that the Indominus managed to do everything seen in the movie. The final, and maybe even the biggest issue of the film, is the theme of using dinosaurs in warfare. No military is using any dinosaurs in any type of warfare, and this plot idea makes no sense whatsoever. That's because humans invented these things called guns, which made melee combat a lot less viable. Although, from what we have seen in this movie, the Indominus Rex somehow survives gunshots. But in a war, could you imagine the Indominus going up against a fortified position with machine guns? The Indominus Rex, or any dinosaur for that matter, is not viable in any type of modern military campaign. And let's not forget here that the Indominus Rex cost $38 million to make, even if you talk about only having the Velociraptors in the military. They are genetically engineered theme park creatures that require a team of scientists, immense infrastructure, and months, if not years of work to cultivate. No military on Earth would ever invest a single penny in dinosaurs. They would be much better off investing into just medieval swords. Because let's be real here, 20 guys with swords could also take down the Indominus. Everyone attacks at the same time, some die, but cut off its legs and kill it. Of course, the recurring theme of the Jurassic World movies is the lack of internal logic, and minimally competent characters is persistent. So I suppose that in the Jurassic universe, the Indominus Rex might be able to take on entire tank battalions by itself. If we then get to some of the positives, I actually liked the idea of Owen's character and his bond with the Velociraptors. But I feel that it lacks setup and only has payoff. Blue and the other Velociraptors turning against the Indominus to save Owen is a huge payoff. But it's not earned or set up well enough. But then again, the whole plot wouldn't exist if the movie actually made sense, because InGen should have easily dealt with the Indominus escape. Outside of Owen, Zack and Gray are literally only in the movie to mirror Lex and Tim from the original Jurassic Park. But if you actually took them out, the movie wouldn't lose anything substantial. The entire scene of fixing the old Jurassic Park Jeep and exploring the old visitor center is just completely nostalgia farming. Having B.D. Wong return as Henry Wu actually makes sense, because he was part of the original Jurassic Park, and he would be one of the leading specialists on the dinosaur creation front. And honestly, I think that's good nostalgia, because the prior movies haven't established anything that would contradict that. But then the movie made Henry incompetent, but that's mostly because the plot is contrived, so the characters automatically behave illogically or inconsistently. But forcefully mentioning Hammond, and Zack and Gray visiting the old visitor center, is contrived nostalgia, which ultimately weakens the movie instead of making it better. I'm actually one of the few people in the world whose first Jurassic film experience was Jurassic World. Because back in 2015, my mom wanted to go see it and she said that Jurassic Park is a pretty cool film, so I tagged along. But I had no idea about Jurassic Park or the franchise as a whole at the time. But I remember after watching Jurassic World without the context of Jurassic Park, that I didn't understand what was so special about it. Only once I watched Jurassic Park did I understand why it's so special. I would honestly recommend watching Jurassic World first, and then watching Jurassic Park right after, because then you can easily see why Jurassic Park is infinitely better, and why Jurassic World fails in comparison.